Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina wa Mawlana Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahabati ajma'in. Allahumma inni nawaitu at-ta'allum wa at-ta'lim wa at-tadhakkura wa at-tadhkir wa an-naf'a wa al-intifa' wal-ifadata wal-istifada wal-hatha ala tamassuki bi kitabillahi wa sunnati rasulihi sallallahu alayhi wa sallama والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم يا الله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ومولانا محمد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. So last week we spoke about nasiha and how nasiha relates to the function of a tailor. That's what we said. Or one of the meanings of the word nasaha in the Arabic language is that how nasiha relates to the function of a tailor. And that nasiha is supposed to be something which is tailored to each individual. That's the idea. That nasiha is meant to be tailored to each individual. Just as a tailor needs to take care of, to choose the correct thread, the correct material, the method, and all the other things. Likewise, the one advising needs to take care of the person in front of them. Who they are, what their individual circumstances are, what their context is, everything they can know about the person. And so tailoring, like nasiha, we can see it has a repair function. Because when you tailor something, you're repairing something. Especially when you're patching garments. And so when you're fixing something, you're filling it in. And the only one of Allah's creation that can truly repair us and fix us is the Prophet ﷺ. There is no one else amongst Allah's creation that can repair us or that can fix us like the Prophet ﷺ can and does. In the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal mentions this. Azizun alayhi ma anittum, harisun bil mu'minina ra'ufur rahim. That anything that causes you to grieve, anything that causes you to suffer, makes him upset. That's the general idea of it. Azizun alayhi ma anittum. Anything that causes you to suffer, it grieves him. That's the Prophet ﷺ. And that he is deeply concerned. That's what the ayah says. Bil mu'minina ra'ufur rahim. That he is deeply concerned for you, anxious. And that towards all the believers, he is tender and compassionate. And so when we see the Prophet ﷺ as that being that has brought for us guidance, we can see guidance is a type of nasiha then. It's that thing that's repairing us. It's the thing that's fixing us. It's the thing that's filling in the holes that we have naturally in our lives. And that's why then our primary relationship as believers is to study and attempt to understand the Prophet ﷺ. We can never do that because they say there's only one Dhat, one being in existence that understands the Prophet ﷺ and knows who the Prophet ﷺ is, and that is Allah. No one else knows the Prophet ﷺ. But it's upon us to study and to attempt to understand who the Prophet ﷺ is. And that's where our foundational ideas are then derived from. Which then means that we must read his seerah. We must read the shama'il. We must read the hadith that we have. And it's incredible if you think about it, that how far reaching the Sahaba were when they started to compile the words of the Prophet ﷺ. Right? They brought them together and they put them together. And then the great Imams, what did they used to do? They used to travel. Think about it. They would travel from country to country for one hadith. They would hear that someone in some part of the world has a hadith that we've not heard of, and they will travel to that part of the world to get hadith. Now, if we think about the context of travel, our context of travel is markedly different from their context of travel. Their context of travel is that when they left home, they don't know if they're coming back, how long it's going to take them, what sorts of provisions they need to take with themselves and leave behind for their families. But they did it because they knew that the continuation and the continuing health of the dunya and of its people depends upon preserving the words of the Prophet ﷺ. They were far-reaching, which means that a little bit of discomfort for us is no big deal. We will go and travel the lands, and we will record the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ, and we'll bring them for future generations to share in. And it doesn't matter if we have to not see our families for months and years and sometimes never come back. It's okay. And that's the companions. If there's any group of people that have a reason to not leave their homes, it's the companions. Why? Because we're told about the companions. They've done what they had to do. If they just stayed in Medina, we go now to Medina, we don't want to come back. If anyone had a right to stay in Medina, it was them. But they didn't. They left the most beloved place in existence. That's what the ulama say. That the most sacred space in existence is the place where the Prophet ﷺ is buried. They knew that and recognized that more than any of us can possibly recognize it. And yet they brought themselves away from it. Right? In fact, sometimes for some of the companions, we know that it was, in fact, the fact that the Prophet ﷺ was no longer in Medina in the sense that they were used to, they couldn't bear themselves to be in Medina, and then they would leave. And we know the very well-known stories of the great companions. When Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu anhu, when he left and he lived in Damascus, he's buried in Damascus in Bab al-Saghir. That's where Sayyidina Bilal is buried. But then he had a dream. And in the dream, the Prophet ﷺ says to him, "Ma hadhi al-jafwa ya Bilal?" What is this time that you spent away from me? In other words, you're in Damascus and I'm here in Medina and you're so far away. And they say that Sayyidina Bilal set off to Medina there and then. And what's incredible about his meeting with the Prophet ﷺ is that when he reaches Medina, he actually throws himself on the grave. That's what the narrations tell us. As if, someone's hugging their beloved. I mean, if you saw that today, there'll be uproar amongst people, right? But the fact is that this is someone who lived with the Prophet ﷺ, was the mu'adhin of the Prophet ﷺ, learned from the Prophet ﷺ, were willing to sacrifice themselves for him. And so why are we saying all of this? Because it's just to underscore the importance of the prophetic words. That's what it is. That's what should wake us up and put us to bed and fill our days. That's what our ears should be listening to all the time. And so when we want to then give nasiha in the context that we've been speaking about, really it's pen and paper time. In other words, when someone comes to us and says, look, I'd like to take some nasiha, what we should do, like a tailor does, is take a few days to think about someone's situation. We should ask them beforehand, what is it that you want to speak with me about? Give me all the parameters that you can give. Give me some context about you, things that I might need to know. It's not a quick text message to say, I'm thinking of changing a job to this job or going from moving home to home. What do you think? That's not nasiha. It's not going to benefit you, and you're putting someone that you're asking at risk as well, because they're going to say something which may not benefit you. So it really is something that we have to take time over and think about. Now, if we're perceptive enough, if you think about our lives deeply, what we will see is that our lives themselves are a type of nasiha for us. You don't actually have to even go out there to ask anyone. As long as you're looking into your own life and you're seeing the things that have happened to you and the circumstances that you've been in and how Allah Azza wa Jal has brought you through those circumstances, that's nasiha in itself. Right? And all we need to then do is make sure that we're carefully observing the signs and the occurrences in our lives. That's why the alim, that's what the world, this whole thing around us. It's called the alam. In Arabic, that literally means a sign. In other words, Allah has put us in a place, and the name of that place is a sign in Arabic. There's signs all around us. It's up to us whether we want to look at the signs or not, right? And that's the thing. These signs aren't the signs that are observed with your eyes. Because you can have a sign from Allah. It's right in front of you. You can actually physically, visibly see it, but you're blind to it. These signs that Allah has placed for us are not to be seen with the eye. They're seen, what people say, with the heart. What that means is that you have to reflect over what's happened. When this thing happened in your life, why did it happen like that? When it didn't happen, why didn't it happen? Because it's a manifestation of Allah's names, we know, right? Everything that happens is a manifestation of His names. Allah Azza wa Jalla in the Quran tells us that there might be things that you don't like. Asa an takrahu shay'an wa huwa khayrun lakum. But it's really good for you. And then He also tells us that there might be things that you really like, but they're not good for you. Asa an tuhibbu shay'an wa huwa sharrun lakum. That it might be the case that you love things, but they're not good for you. It's perspective. It's understanding what's good for me is what Allah deems good for me. And the greats, if you look at their du'as, sometimes I think we're afraid to ask Allah in this way. Oh Allah, give me what's good for me and not what I ask you to give me. I mean, how many of us will do that, right? Say, Allah, I've got this comfortable life and things are happening, but I'm asking you to give me what's good for me, but give it to me in afiyah. Give it to me in such a way that it's not going to cause me any difficulty. We're allowed to do that. But we're saying, Allah, you give me what's best for me. Keep me here for as long as it's good for me. When it's not good for me, take me away from it. They're very tough things to say. But that's a sign of where we are on our path and our journey then. Because the great people are literally asking this every single day. And that's a way of judging where we are in relation to Allah. That how confidently can we ask Allah that, Ya Rab, take me if this is not good for me. Right? Because Allah says about the people that, are sort of on the other side in their relationship with Allah, that they love the dunya ashaddu hubban. Their love for the dunya so much they would do anything to stay here for as long as they can. But then Allah says, but what about the people that love Allah? He says their love is even more intense for Allah than the love that these people have for the dunya. Again, perspective of how our lives teach us lessons. And so what we can do then is that we can come to learn in one of two ways from our lives. We can either learn by reaching a certain age, where we now have grey hair, right? Some of us have known each other for more than 2 decades, and visibly we've changed, right? So we can either learn by reaching a certain age where we get grey hair, and we see what's passed before us. We reminisce how the days used to be. And when that becomes more and more, you know that you're getting older. And maybe it's the case that we don't have the same strength anymore, the same zeal anymore. When we were 20, we were willing to set up organizations and institutions and inshallah we still are, of course we are. But maybe there was a certain type of zeal that comes from being 20 and 25, right? Having said that, the greatest people that I've seen set up institutions are actually in their 50s. Sometimes experience bears itself on important projects. But what we come to realize is that the end is nearer to us than the beginning. Once you're in your 40s and 50s, you kind of think, look, I'm closer to the end than the beginning. And as a result of that, we begin to occupy our time with things that actually matter now. The things that would bother us when we were younger, they seem not to bother us anymore. We're kind of like, what, it doesn't really matter as much. Trivial things, then they don't seem important like they used to. So in this sense, it's our grey hair that's taught us. But there's another way though, which is to learn through reflection and thinking. When we're still young, the same things that we're going to have learnt once we get to that age of grey, we can do it when we have the vigor of youth. And so the way that we would learn here, one of the main ways, through reflection and observation and thinking, is to learn through understanding the consequences of the things that we do. It's a big word. what are the consequences of what I do? We have to become people of consequences. Why? Because our whole existence is consequential. Our whole existence has meaning, which in itself means that the things that we do, we have to think about them. And once we become someone of consequence, in other words, that we're constantly thinking about the things that we do, we become people then of responsibility, right? And it could be from small things to big things, right? Meaning I'm going to come here for the class today. Well, there's a consequence to that. Right? You may have something that you had to give up, something which you may have to wait. You may have to take care of someone and you can't come here. There's different things. You need to weigh everything up. What are the consequences of you both coming? But at the same time, what are the consequences of not coming? Not here. I'm saying not when you see this in Muslim lands where the gatherings of remembrance and reminders are peppered throughout the week. You have 3 or 4 gatherings, just normal. And this is something that surprised me when we lived in the Arab world, where you'd see it's that for us, it was almost an event to go to a talk or to a gathering. You know, we've done something great. But I saw here that this was just a fact of people's lives. It was just as they went to school in the morning, just as they were going to a majlis. It wasn't something that, oh, you know, I go to that majlis. No, it was very much something that they identified with. And it was young and old. It was, and I'm not just saying this, you'll have people who are even on sort of, you know, you could say in the sphere of criminality. You'd meet people and you think, you know, tabarakallah, they still had their shuyukh. But they just recognize, look, we're just having a tough time with life right now. But they never lost connection with their teachers. And that's the whole idea of a teacher. A teacher is someone who's parental, fatherly, understanding. There were people that would come to our teachers and they would say, you know, this, for instance, person doesn't pray at all. And says, you know, I'm only going to pray one prayer only. That's it. And the Shaykh would say, okay, what do you want him to say? Don't pray if you're not going to pray all 5? It's a way, it's called tafaqquh, his understanding. And of course, every person is different. You need to understand who you're talking to. Someone may need you to say to them, look, it's better that you pray 5 because you can see something in them. But people who are, let's say, struggling even to just to get to the prayer, get to the wudu, one is a beginning for them. And so some of the students, they asked the Shaykh, you know, why did you say to him it's okay that you can? He said, I didn't say it's okay. I say pray 1. And when you pray 1, he said to his students, he'll pray 2. Because as long as he's sincere in praying 1 will not be enough for him. He'll pray the 2nd, and then he'll pray the 3rd, and the 4th, and the 5th. And someone who's sincere in praying 5, it's not enough for them. They'll pray additionally. And when they pray the additions that we have through the Sunnah, they will realize that that's not enough for them. And they'll pray the night prayer. And when they pray the night prayer properly, they'll realize that that's not enough for them. Can you see the point here? That people who are tuned in, ibadah is just a physical manifestation of what exists in their being. Because their being is so overwhelmed with wanting to be with Allah, that ibadah is a manifestation, and as many manifestations as they can get, they'll do it. I mean, for instance, you can have someone who, you know, we say you should make an intention whatever you do. You can make an intention with anything, and you might think, well, why would I need to make an intention? For example, I'm going to the masjid to pray Salatul Jumu'ah. Why would I need to make an intention to do that? I'm going to the mosque. My direction toward a certain physical space, is that not enough of an intention? We're not speaking about that. We're speaking about the fact that if you consciously decide that I'm going to make an intention to go to the masjid, that specific intention has consequences. It means that now you will walk there with a certain type of dignity, a certain type of honor, a certain type of bringing to mind the fact of what we're doing. Right? As opposed to, I'm going to the mosque, and on the way you were on our phone, we've bumped into someone, we've had a chat, we've not really, we don't even know how we got to the masjid. We left our home, and next thing I know it, I'm in the masjid. That that walk was unknown to us, or the car, whatever it may have been. We've turned the radio on and we've heard the radio on the way. We've taken a call. No, they say that the Prophet ﷺ, when the adhan used to go off, what did his family, his wives say? It's like he didn't know us and we didn't know him. That's the point. When you make an intention to go to the masjid, right? It doesn't matter if I meet someone on the way. It's just, and you're walking on, right? It doesn't matter if a call comes in right now. I'm going to the masjid. So can you see there's a difference between actually bringing yourself to make an intention about something and thinking that my action, because it involves me doing good, i.e. going to the masjid to pray, that itself is my intention. No. A conscious intention is something markedly different from just thinking I'm doing something correct. Why? Because it brings to mind the things that we should be doing really. Now, if we look here, we're speaking about consequences, that one of the reasons, and it's important because it actually follows on from what we did last term, that one of the reasons why people backbite, because last term's lessons were on the perils of the tongue, that one of the reasons why people backbite is because they have little regard for consequence. Nothing. Because they don't care about what's going to come from this, who's going to be hurt, whether it's true or not, whether I need to bite my tongue or whether I need to be patient and see nothing. There's no concept of consequences. That's even before you get into the actual harm it does on a societal level, which we spoke about. And most, if not all, backbiting is more about a deficiency in ourselves than it is about the person who's being spoken about. That's backbiting. It's more about us. And so everyone will become a sheikh one day. Everyone. Because, it just depends. Will it be once we have grey hair, which is the actual meaning of sheikh, the one who has grey hair? Or will it be through reflection and observation? Right? We're all going to become shaykh one day. We have a choice. Which one do we want? And one is clearly better than the other. And inshallah, fihi ma khair. Now, if we look at the page that we're on, page 5, the Imam is now actualizing his own nasiha. Because this little letter is nasiha. That's the whole point of this letter that he writes to his student. It's about writing him a small treatise that will be giving him some counsel. And so the Imam is actualizing his own nasiha. And how is he doing that? He's doing it by doing what he says should be done. By mentioning the hadith of the blessed Prophet ﷺ. Now, and so if you look at the first one that the Imam records, he says, Ayyuhal walad. Again, the endearing term. من جملة ما نصح به رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أمته قوله عليه السلام. So included in what Allah's Messenger has advised his community عليه السلام is the following. علامة إعراض الله تعالى عن العبد اشتغاله بما لا يعنيه. That an indication of the withdrawal of Allah the Exalted from the worshipper is his busying himself with what does not concern him. Now, there's a few things we should keep in mind here. Number one, it's the abd that's mashghul. It's not Allah who's yushghiluhu. In other words, either Allah is making you busy, or you making yourself busy. The consequence of it is that where's Allah in your life now? Allah never turns away from you. Let's make that very clear. There is no instance where it says that Allah will turn away from you because He turns away from you. These are all signs that relate back to us. So for example, even if you see in Fatiha, غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِينَ, that doesn't mean that Allah is don't include us amongst those who are upon whom your anger is. That's how it's normally translated, right? It doesn't mean that. It means upon those who have brought the anger upon themselves. Because Allah's anger doesn't fall on someone for no reason. And even the Arabic it says that maghdub in Arabic means the one who has brought ghadab upon themselves through their actions. And it's the same thing here. It's saying that it's not Allah that's turning away from you. What it's really saying is that you've turned away from Allah. And that's exactly the Quranic message. That inna Allah la yughayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim. And this often is translated as Allah will only change you so long as you change yourself. It doesn't mean that. It means the complete opposite to that. It means Allah will only change you from your good state to a worse state if that's what you want. That's what it means. Allah will only allow you to go towards that state if that's the state that you want. Because ultimately, it's Allah who's in control of everything that we do. So that's the first thing, which is that the idea of busying oneself is on account of ourselves, not because Allah is making us busy. And this is also similar to the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ tells us, "Min husni Islam al-mar'i tarkuhu ma la ya'ni," that one of the signs that one's Islam is sound is to leave things which are of no consequence to him. Min husni Islam al-mar'i tarkuhu ma la ya'ni. That's a sign that your Islam is in a good place. To leave those things which have no consequence for you. Right? And also which have no meaning. That's what it actually literally means in Arabic. Ma la ya'ni. And then the second hadith, وَإِنَّ إِمْرَأً وَإِنَّ امْرَأً ذَهَبَتْ سَاعَةٌ مِنْ عُمُرِهِ فِي غَيْرِ مَا خُلِقَ لَهُ مِنْ الْعِبَادَةِ لَجَدِيرٌ أَنْ تَطُولَ عَلَيْهِ حَسْرَتُهُ. That if an hour of a man's life slips by in other than that which he was created for in the way of worship, in other words, you're not engaging in the things that you're meant to be doing, then it's proper that this person's affliction be protracted. In other words, just why would he be surprised if what's happening to him on the Day of Judgment is what's happening to him? Right? Nas'alullah salam wal afiyah. وَمَنْ جَاوَزَ الْأَرْبَعِينَ وَلَمْ يَغْلِبْ خَيْرُهُ عَلَى شَرِّهِ فَلْيَتَجَهَّزْ إِلَى النَّارِ وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. And whoever passes 40, so this is the third one now, whoever passes 40 without his virtue in other words, without his virtue being more than his vice, let him get ready for the hellfire. Right? Now we'll speak about each of these because they have a common theme there. And then the Imam says, وَفِي هَذِهِ النَّصِيحَةِ كِفَايَةٌ لِأَهْلِ الْعِلْمِ. That this advice contains enough for people of knowledge. Now, these three hadith have a common underlying thread. All of them have an underlying thread, which is that don't waste your time. That's the underlying thread in all three of these counsels. Don't waste your time. Now, the thing that we have to keep in mind here is that one of the most precious things that we have is time. That's one of the most precious things that we have, time. And using the time that we have to engaging meaningless activity makes no sense to someone that has been given the gift of being able to reflect on the things that we do. Meaning we as creatures have the ability to understand consequence. Because we have the ability to understand consequence, what the Imam is telling us by quoting his hadith is that if we're wasting our times in things which have no consequence, have no meaning, it's completely antithetical to the exact reason why we're here to start with. We've lost sight of why we're here, right? What we'll see is then that what's the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ tells us that it's narrated by the great Anas bin Malik, who was the khadim of the Prophet ﷺ. And Anas bin Malik, radiyallahu anhu ardahu, He says that قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, that the Prophet عليه السلام said, لا تقوم الساعة حتى يتقارب الزمان, that the hour will not be established, in other words, the day of judgment won't come, until time begins to pass quickly. Hadith of the Prophet, in Tirmidhi, it's Hasan. فَتَكُونُ السَّنَةُ كَالشَّهْرِ, and so a year will pass like it's a month. وَالشَّهْرُ كَالْجُمُعَةِ, and a month will pass like it's a week. وَتَكُونُ الْجُمُعَةُ كَالْيَوْمِ, and a week will pass like a day. وَيَكُونُ الْيَوْمُ كَالسَّاعَةِ, and a day will pass like it's an hour. وَتَكُونُ السَّاعَةُ كَالضَّرَمَةِ بِالنَّارِ, and an hour will pass like a flicker of a flame. Now, why does time move so fast for people? Right? Wherever the clock is, you put it in a million different homes, it's going to move the same. So the phenomenon of time is the same. The time doesn't speed up. You can't put more powerful batteries in there and the clock's going to move any quicker. But what does change is the perception of time. That's what changes. The perception of time changes. And one of the reasons why our perception of time changes is because as people, we begin to engage in meaningless activity. There's no routine, there's no core, there's no stability. Right? Now, why is this the case? Because our perception of time is directly linked to change. That's what time is. Time is change. If you see how time is measured, it's measured by change. How the planets move and how the planet rotates. That's time, revolves. That's time. It's linked into the idea of movement and change. Now, what do we have in the modern world in abundance that the people that came before us didn't have? We have change. It's a byword of our age. If you think about all the things that we have and the type of activities that we engage in, it's all about moving on from one thing to another thing. This is the age of not being content. And not being content means that what we want is something new all the time. We don't need to rehearse this. We know the 14 isn't enough, the 15 will do. The 42 inch isn't enough, the 54 inch has to do. The 3-bed wasn't enough. Why? Because we are surrounded by this machine that's convincing us that the things that you have aren't enough. And so because there's this movement of continuous change around us, what happens to us? Our perception of time gets warped. And the more that the more change that we begin to notice, the faster time will move for us. Till the point that there will be an iPhone coming out every month. Mark my words. This is 1st November 2024. Right? It will happen. Right? They used to change the number plates of a car once a year. Do you remember and now they change it twice a year. If they could do it, why? Because it's as much as they can do. And that's why, what do we say? That tama'a, to be covetous, to be greedy in Arabic, tama'a, is the same word for food, ta'am in Arabic. Same 3 letters. Right? We can't get enough of it. And so one of the greatest qualities that a believer can have is to be content with whatever Allah has provisioned for us and to take of the dunya what we need of it. And the thing that differentiates us with, I guess, people on a larger scale from those that came before us is that they had a sacred routine. We can have it. We can have the sacred routine. But the people who came before us had a sacred routine, doing the same thing again and again and again. And I think I've heard this word now, sacred monotony. I personally don't like that word because I don't think you can, it's almost a contradiction in terms. Sacred is by its very nature not monotonous. Sacred is bliss. Sacred is happiness. Sacred is joy, right? And so we're blessed in that we don't have to travel far to see what our routine is. Our routine is the one that's been given to us by Allah. And the thing is, what does Allah say to us? Remember me in the morning, remember me in the evening. I'll suffice you for everything that's in between. Just fix me at the beginning of your day and at the end of the day, and I will take care of you for whatever's in between that. He's not asking us, Allah Azza wa Jal, to just never leave the masjid or never leave the musalla. And we've said this before. If you were to aggregate all of our worship for Allah, the 5 prayers a day, and we live to the age of 80, it accumulates to maybe a year's worth of worship. If you accumulate all that time together in one space, it's 1 year maybe, on a back of an envelope type calculation. So in this span that we've been given, let's say 70 to 80 years, we spent 1 to 2 years as an agglomeration of our worship in actually doing, but Allah said, that's enough, that's all I wanted from you. And I'm going to give you this in exchange. It's not even fathomable for us. What's being required from us is something very, very small. And if anything, it's something which is an internal change in us, which is sincerity, good action, good character, good cheer towards other people, selflessness, helping others, right? Being of benefit to those around us. As the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-Muslimu man salim al-Muslimuna min yadihi wa lisanihi. That a Muslim is someone from whom everyone is safe, from their tongue and their hands. No one should fear a Muslim when they're around them, right? A Muslim is safe space. And so if we look at this idea that, of valuing our time, everything that Allah has created is created for the purpose. مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا. Oh Allah, you didn't create all of this that I'm looking at for no reason. You created it for a purpose. And so if we look at, for example, the trees around us, the trees are carrying out their function. The exact thing that Allah has made a tree for, it's doing it. The animals that Allah created, they are carrying out the function that Allah has given them to carry out in this. They have a sabil. Allah tells us about this. And they never divert from that. You don't see this in the animal kingdom, or in the plant kingdom, or in the inanimate kingdom. Everything that Allah has made, the mountains, the cosmos as a whole, is carrying out its function. What about us humans? We're the only thing in existence that has the ability to recognize consequences. We're the only thing in existence that can be like angels, if we wanted to be, or worse than animals. It's a choice. We can be like angels, or we can be worse than animals. And that's squarely in our own hands, right? And how much we want it. And so, as I mentioned, meaningless activity and all these things such as backbiting and other things, it's really because we don't have an understanding of consequences. It doesn't matter if we say something about someone or what it may hurt them or what it may do to them, no problem at all. And one of the things and what we should have in our lives is an inventory of things where we look and we see and we hope that the things that we're doing are meaningful. It can't be that you just do the 9-to-5 grind, because that's a third of your life. And then you take another third of sleep, you have just a third left. Everything we do has to carry meaning for us. And we should have inventories. What are the things that we're involved in, the projects that we're involved in our local communities? Who are we helping? Who are we being of benefit to? Where are we taking benefit from? If days go by, and as I said, you learn either through your grey hair or you learn through reflection, this is one of those moments that we can sit down and make these inventories of where are we benefiting? What are we leaving behind? Our parents, I truly believe that we couldn't do what they did, which is build the infrastructure for us here, the masajid. Our parents worked in factories and sent money to their families wherever they came from and still had enough left to build a masajid. I really don't believe our generation could do that. We barely have enough time for anyone else, let alone giving money to build a masjid. I'm sure if you did some kind of a study, you'd see that what they did compared to what we think we do, right? But every generation has its responsibility. Our responsibility is to leave something for those who come after us. But our responsibility is also one of consequence, which is, what are we seeing in front of us in relation to the major ideas that permeate our lives? How are we going to change those? How are we going to give Muslims and the communities around us the confidence in understanding who we are? This takes a great deal of effort, but the effort is there to be made for us. And so these three hadith, I mean, again, it's really a mu'jiza, as we say, because in Arabic, a mu'jiza is what we translate as a miracle. A mu'jiza in Arabic means when you incapacitate someone. That's what it actually means. And so what's the idea of incapacitating someone in relation to what we call a miracle? It's because the way that Allah has set up the world, it runs according to a certain order. But when a mu'jiza occurs, it's when the thing that we expected to occur doesn't occur, and instead of that, something else occurs, and you're just, whoa, what happened there? I wasn't expecting that. Something else has happened. Right? Now, how is that a mu'jiza in relation to the words of the Prophet ﷺ? Because ordinarily, to give us these gems of counsels, you would need 15 pages. But the Prophet ﷺ is giving it to us in 3 lines. And this is what's referred to as Jawami'ul Kalam. We've spoken about this many times. That the Prophet ﷺ was given this gift, was given this mu'jiza, that, as Imam al-Shafi'i says, that it's the only only beings that can fully comprehend and encompass the meanings of words are prophets. لا يحيط باللغة إلا النبي. And so that means that the things that the Prophet ﷺ wants to convey to us, he is perfectly aware of which words are going to carry the exact meanings that he wants to convey. And because he knows that, he doesn't need to use any additional words. You'll never see that, oh, this could have been said in this way or that way. Right? If you look at the hadith, and I said this before, if you look at the hadith, how many hadith are just, literally 1 line, 2 lines, 1 line, 2 lines? Very rarely do you get sort of lengthy hadith. And when they are, those lengthy hadith themselves should be really, for other people, volumes. And that's something that we have to orient ourselves to, which is where we started. That our beginning and our end is a wish and a prayer to understand the words of the Prophet ﷺ as he intended them to be understood. That's our frames, if you like. That's the paradigm in which we want to live in and understand things, and understand the meaning of things, and understand why we're here and what we're meant to do and how we're meant to navigate this thing that we call the world. And then I'll just start this line, but we'll finish here just on this line, and we'll begin from here next week on page 7, which is, the Imam says now that it starts with a new, for us, a new paragraph here. أيها الولد النصيحة سهلة والمشكل قبولها لأنها في مذاق متبع الهوى مر. That, oh child, dear child, I know it says disciple, advice is easy. Giving advice is easy, or just advice is easy. What is difficult is accepting it. Why? Because it is bitter in taste to those who pursue vain pleasures. Right? It's not easy to accept advice when it doesn't fall in line with the things that we want to do. So this is quite a detailed a paragraph here, which we'll inshallah unpack next week. So we'll stop here for this week. If there's any questions, either for the good and the great that are online, or those who are here today.